All right. How are you, Commissioner Wallinger?
I am actually under the weather. You can probably hear it in my nose a little bit.
Sound nasally.
It's the gift that my kids give me every year when they go back to school.
Oh man, oh man. Hope you hang in there. Feel better.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I see Commissioner Brooks. I see Mr. Fireside, who I got to meet in person recently. How are you? Good. I think we're just gonna wait for Commissioner Esposito. She's gonna join by phone this afternoon. And just so everybody knows, I'm gonna facilitate and lead today's meeting on her behalf because she's remote.
And I just give a shout out to Principal Horn, who sent such nice information to us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not sure who's here from the board office, so let's see who's joining from the board office.
I see Tanisha.
Oh,
I'm also on.
okay.
Oh, I didn't see you,
Okay.
Jennifer. Sorry.
Yep.
I didn't see. Yeah, sometimes Teams is like kind of odd with the way it's laid out. Do you want me to give Commissioner Esposito just a few minutes, Dr. Judkins?
I think we're okay. I think we can get started.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So good afternoon. On behalf of the Chair of the Policy Committee, Ashley Esposito, I'd like to welcome everybody to the September 17th meeting of the Policy Committee. If you've not done so yet, please mute your phone. Anyone who does not mute their phone may be muted by the call moderator or removed from the call. Additionally, if you're not a board member of the CEO or a member of her staff, please turn off your video. I'll now read a roll call of the board to identify who's on today's meeting. Please identify yourself first before speaking for the record. So Commissioner Esposito, I think we have Commissioner Redding-Wallinger.
Redding-Wallinger present.
Commissioner Brooks.
It's present.
Thank you, Commissioner Brooks, and I'm present. And so that makes 1, 2, 3 present and 1 absent for today's meeting. We'll just fuse in Commissioner Esposito when she arrives. So we've got a pretty good agenda today. I'm really excited to delve into the 2 policies that we've got and a couple of different compliance report reviews. We'll also make sure that there's time built in today for public comment, and we should wrap up in plenty of time by 5:30. So we'll kick it off by looking at policy JICJ. It's student use of portable electronic communication devices, and this is a framing conversation, which is a little bit different of a format for us on the policy committee, but I appreciate the good thinking and thoughts around it. So turn it over to Chief Sivan to lead us through the first part of today's discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we've got a team here. I'm joined by Calvin Moore, Deputy Chief of Schools, and Seema Shah Nelson, Special Assistant to the CEO, the broader team looking at this policy. And as you mentioned, this is a framing conversation. So on policies that have broad impact in our district, we've developed a process for the new commissioners of coming first with some of the broad background and big questions we're trying to tackle to start the feedback process early with the community, and frankly, to get initial feedback from commissioners before we put pen to paper. So that's what we're doing here. And as we move to the next slide, overall, our purpose here is to look at these policies, which really are robust policies, but what ways we can clarify and enhance the system-wide supports to really respond to challenges that social media and cell phones pose to the learning and social emotional well-being of students. And so we're going to start with an overview of the existing policy, then look at some of the recent trends and challenges with cell phone and social media use, and then we're going to go to the specific framing questions and some of the work that we've done already on this topic to help with lessons learned for the future. So turning it over to the Deputy Chief of Schools to talk about the current policy.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chief Sivans. So one of the things that we want to do is kind of go through and outline what does our current use of portable electronic devices allow for, and what does our current policy allow for. So next slide, please. So in our current policy, first and foremost, our current policy outlines that we have an understanding that there's an important role that technology plays in the life of our students. Of course, we all know that, and that it can be beneficial when it is responsibly used. And so one of the things that this policy currently supports is the responsible use of the portable electronic communication devices, and for students to be in possession of them when it is not, so that it does not interfere our academic instruction, student safety, and interfere with a positive school climate. Next slide, please. So what does it mean for a student to be in possession of a cell phone? So currently, students can be in possession of a cell phone if their parents submit a student and parent contract. So a signed student and parent contract should be in place, and that allows for students to be in possession of a phone or a cellular electronic device on campus, but it must be powered off and on silent mode. That means it should be secured in a backpack, locker, purse, somewhere out of sight, and either off or in silent mode. Next slide, please. So what does that look like for students in grades pre-K-8? So for students in grades pre-K-8, that looks like our students being able to have their cell phones before and after school, on a bus. They can use it when prompted by a teacher. They can use it for incentives that the school may be having, like use their QR code to be able to be a part of something. And if the principal approves a written request from the parent, that the parent is asking for a specific reason for the student to be in possession of their phone throughout the day. They cannot be in possession of it in such things like detention or et cetera. Next slide, please. So,
yeah, give me just like 2 more minutes. Should be okay. Oh.
All right, sorry. So for students in grades 9 through 12, they can be in possession for all of the same areas. In addition to, they can be in possession of their cell phones during lunch. So students in grades 9 through 12 can still have their phone in possession before and after school for activities and on the bus, if the teacher prompts them, or if there's some type of school-specific event or principal prompted, principal designated area for them to be in possession of their phone. Next slide, please. All right, so currently our enforcement of cell phone use is aligned to our student code of conduct, and it can result in loss of privileges. So school staff can confiscate a phone to avoid disruption to the learning environment, to protect the academic integrity during testing administration, and to ensure a safe and orderly environment and protect the health and welfare of students. But here's something to note. Students, if their cell phone is confiscated or et cetera, city schools is not responsible for the theft, damage, loss, or unauthorized use of the portable electronic device that they bring onto the school grounds. All right, so school-wide suspension of cell phone privileges. So a principal has the discretion to suspend the use of a cell phone in the event of an emergency or for a school climate-related disturbance. However, it is noted that it should be fairly announced so that all students receive due notice that this suspension of the privilege is occurring. And use means being in possession where the phone is not off or not on silent.
So with that background and the policy that's pretty strong already in terms of the limits, one of the pieces we're grappling with is how to clarify this policy, how to make sure that it continues to be of relevance, and really how to address what Calvin mentioned on the last slide is individual school disturbances, but also really increased evidence that cell phone use, social media use by students while in school is disturbing the learning opportunity for our students. And so one of the best-selling book out there by Jonathan Haidt has looked at and tied proliferation of smartphones and access to social media for teenagers to declines in student mental health, increases in student loneliness and isolation, and decline in academic achievement. And as you go to the next slide, we see really an increased impact of social media, and we see a tied to the increased use of phones to smartphones, and access to social media is primarily what students are doing on their phones. So this shows just the amount of kids overall that are using the popular social media platforms. And then if you look on the next slide, we put some information also from the Pew Research Center about Black and Hispanic teens being more likely than white teens to say they're online almost constantly. So that bears out in our district as well. And then if you look at the impacts of this for students on the next slide, in terms of learning, the disruptions in classrooms that we're hearing from teachers, we're hearing from staff, taking the time to minimize those distractions, but also realizing that constant use of cell phones and social media have an impact on students' attention spans, which affects reading, impact on students' sleeplessness, which impacts their concentration. And a lot of the efforts we're making to redirect students limits and makes it more difficult for us to devote the resources we need to do for school. And then also, as on the next slide, real impacts on social emotional well-being, increasing research about increased social media use leading to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, self-harm, as well as undermining the positive school environment with increasing cyberbullying, fights instigated on social media, acting out and pranking for likes and shares. Those are some of the things we're experiencing in Baltimore, but also nationwide. And as you go to this next slide, I think that often there is this mantra out there that if kids could just put cell phones away, everything would be okay. But I think the recognition, and this is why we've really gravitated to these comments recently from the Surgeon General, that this is often not a fair fight for our kids, right? So our kids are up against the best engineers on the planet, the best product developers on the planet, who are designing their products so that kids and adults too, but particularly kids, are maximizing the amount of time they're spending, and that's not a fair fight. And as you look, there is increasing research about the way in which these social media platforms are designed to keep kids on them, manipulating the algorithms, really manipulating the products. So one of the things that was, I didn't realize, but as getting into this and looking at this, the way in which you often scroll down on whether it's Snap or Instagram, the wait time is carefully calibrated to keep you coming back, right? How long it waits builds up the anticipation, and you keep on coming back for more. So all of those has prompted us and other school districts, as you go to the next slide, to think about what can we do. And one of the things, and this is why you see our chief legal officer involved, is one of the things we've done is file a lawsuit against social media platforms, joining over 500 districts across the country, including in Maryland, and really taking a leadership role. And so we wanted to also think, and this is part of this policy review, is how can our efforts and our policy support the work we're doing to really focus on the impact of social media on our kids and our schools and trying to abate those harms. And as you go to the next slide, I think that with that context, going back over to Kelvin to talk about how we're thinking about revisions in the context of increased learning about the potential harms for our students.
Thank you. So as we're looking at this policy, we want to really use these questions to kind of evaluate and engage with stakeholders. And more particularly, we would like to get your feedback, board members, around the framing questions that we've identified. So our first framing question is really looking at, to what extent should cell phone use be prohibited or limited during a day? We understand that we now have a larger availability of computers that can support the instructional initiatives and activities in the classroom. We know that we want to think about what are some of the alternatives for lockers, bags, pouches in order to store phones. And we also want to be able to look at what are some of the exceptions for cell phone use for instructional purposes that we would like to consider. Next slide, please. So the next question is around, should the same rules apply system-wide? We really want to get an idea, like, do we want the same rules to apply at each of our grade bands? And are there specific reasons or communities that may prefer or require less restrictive approaches? So those are all the things that we're trying to consider with looking at the system-wide approach to this rule. Question 3 really looks at the use is prohibited, restricted, what protocols are in place for students and families to have contact during the school day. So looking at like what communication plans will exist, especially if we have students that have specific reasons such as an IEP or 504, what are the protocols for timely communication to families around emergencies, and what are the ways in which students and family can have contact during the day. And question 4 really looks at what other items in addition to cell phones should we be considering. So our smartwatches, gaming consoles, tablets, and et cetera, of something that we need to look at, including in this policy as we're looking at the portable electronic devices policy revision. And what additional system-wide strategies are needed to ensure an effective implementation? So really looking at, do we need curriculum around promoting digital literacy? What family engagement strategy should we be engaged in? What toolkits do schools and families need to support them with this? And how can we clarify and make sure that we're aligned to our student code of conduct? I believe I will turn it over to Seema.
Yep, that's right. Hi, everybody. I am Seema Shaw Nelson. I'm Special Assistant to the CEO. Schools are already doing a number of things at the school level. It's not just what we're looking at district-wide. There are also school-based initiatives. One of them is that we have incorporated digital citizenship into our curriculum in various spaces, library media services being one of them, in partnership with Common Sense Media. Also, the Maryland Comprehensive Health Education Framework has also incorporated digital citizenship and use that framework as well. And our big thing is that we have a cell phone free school pilot. So we have Dr. Santelisa's challenged school leaders to pave the way for other schools and trying out what a cell phone free school might look like. We are providing around $5,000 to $10,000 of support, other kinds of technical and logistical help and support from the district of providing those resources. And the goal is to get some lessons learned and best practices that we can incorporate into a policy, and also to design the kind of supports that we provide to schools district-wide. Schools are asked to commit to these 4 criteria. They're implementing and enforcing their policy for the majority of the school year, data reporting and engagement with students, staff, and families, making sure that they're accommodating students with 504 or IEP goals that include the use of technology, and for identifying other students with special circumstances, and of course, adhering to board policy. And these are our 28 pilot schools that have agreed to those 4 criteria. There's a few that have committed to participation but haven't submitted a budget or details yet, but the rest of them have submitted everything, and funds are being transferred into their accounts this week. The schools represent a variety of grade bands, mostly elementary, middle, as you can see, though we do have 6 high schools who are participating. They are at all phases of implementation, mostly in planning phases. Many have started already this year. Some are even in their 2nd year of implementation. And strategies they're using include like those Yonder pouches, different school-free, cell phone-free zones within the school building, collecting them and locking them out, providing incentives, or some combination of those. So these are the broad strategies that people are using. They're using these lockable cell phone pouches. I'm sure you've heard of these Yonder pouches that people are using. So kids put their, each kid has a pouch, and you put your phone in that pouch and it locks for the day. And then there's a mechanism to unlock it at the end of the school day. Other schools have lockers. Some of those are in classrooms where students can lock their phones during the day, or the teachers take them and lock them during, like in homeroom, and then give them back at the end of the day, or if it's just during the class period, or sometimes some of them are like for whole classes, some of them are individual, like the one in this picture here. And some of the school leaders who are leading the way, we have Principal Raquetta from City Springs, who is in her 2nd year of having a cell phone free school. And I think it would be interesting to hear from her if she is here. I cannot see the participants on my screen.
I'm here.
Okay, great.
Did you want me to share
Yeah,
now?
yeah,
Okay.
Please go ahead.
All
Thank
right.
you.
You're welcome. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, commissioners and everyone else on the call. I'm happy to share about our experience here at City Springs with our cell phone policy. I liked the quote from Dr. Santelisa's, because that's basically what led us to have the policy that we have. The adults in the school just felt like enough is enough. We can't take this anymore. Having students having their cell phones on their person during the school day was extremely disruptive, and teachers were tired of spending so much of their time dealing with the cell phone interruptions. And so our policy now is that students are not allowed to have their cell phone on their person during the school day. They come in the morning, and they give their phone to their homeroom teacher. The teachers all have a padded lock box that they put the phones in. They lock them up for the entire day, and they give them back to them at the end of the day, right before dismissal time. One of the things that we had to make very clear to teachers and to parents was that this was not about preventing students from being able to contact their parents if they needed to. Our teachers all know that if a student says, I want to call my parent, that they are supposed to be allowed to do that immediately, either by getting the lockbox and taking the student's phone out and giving it to them to call their parent, or the teacher would call the parent, or we also have all the classrooms have phones. And any resistance that we got from parents was usually around that. Since we have implemented our policy, it has made a significant change in our school culture. Teachers are very happy that they're not dealing with the cell phone issue at all anymore. Parents, for the most part, are happy with our policy. Parents are aware of the problems that cell phones were causing during the school day. When I do have a parent who is not comfortable with the policy, I will have a one-on-one meeting with that parent, and usually we get to a place where they are on board with the policy. The students, if you gave them the choice, they would probably say we want to keep our cell phones. But I think if we ask them how their experience is during the school day without having their cell phones, if they were honest, they would say it was better. I can share that just yesterday, I walked outside during the 8th grade recess time, and I was standing there just watching the kids, and they were all running, playing with each other. There were kids that were walking the track and talking with each other. And one of the 8th grade teachers walked up to me and said, "It's really good watching them be kids, isn't it?" And if they were allowed to have cell phones, they would not be doing any of that. They would all be sitting on the bleachers and they would be on their cell phones. It really has made a significant difference for us. All of our students have devices now that they use for instructional purposes, so there is no reason for them to have their cell phone for instructional purposes. We are very, very happy, and we've had much success with our no cell phone policy at City Springs. I will add that I think that the fact that we do have a very supportive, restorative culture at City Springs has made it easier for us to implement a policy like we have. We do have issues sometimes with students new to City Springs, and we get pushback from them. But usually within about a week or two, they comply with the policy, and they just they accept it. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Raquetta. We also have Principal Horn from Western. Western is one of our pilot schools, and I think she has experienced some major changes at her school just in this past few weeks. So I was hoping, Principal Horn, if you're here, if you could please speak about that.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for inviting me to come and have a conversation about something that's so important. So at Western, we face a unique challenge because we're all girls school, primarily made up of Black and brown girls. And we know that Black and brown girls are facing more of a unique challenge when it comes to social media as it relates to sexism and racism. So it was a public health priority that we wanted to make here at our school and take a stance on ensuring that we did not have cell phones here in the school building. So this is our first year of implementation with the no cell phone policy. We sent messages out to families informing them that we were coming into the year, and we explained our why behind the no cell phone policy. So families were supportive, some students were upset, and teachers were relieved. We started with collecting cell phones in a very rudimentary way where we collected them in bins until our yonder pouches arrived. So we would collect cell phones when students first came and arrived at our school, and then we would pass cell phones out back at the end of the school day, according to the last period teachers. So that seemed to work well. We also have another system that we've implemented this year when it comes to behavior tracking called Dean's List. So if a student is caught with a cell phone out, a teacher will mark on Dean's List whether or not if the student is using the cell phone or there's any other disrupting behaviors with electronics. Because what we also noticed too was with the cell phones, students started to bring their tablets to school, and that became a distraction. So we had to go back to the why behind why we were eliminating cell phones, and then start talking about the social and digital citizenship of what it's like to use electronics in an appropriate manner where it's not distracting. We had to keep going back to our why, so I echo the same sentiments that was mentioned before to families, and going over that and utilizing advisory time, talking about the SEL components of it, and talking about, again, why cell phones were such a distraction and a disruption. So we did collect some feedback after our first week of no cell phones, and I would like to read some of that to you all, if that's okay. So this is feedback from the teachers. One of our math coaches said that he sees students in class listening, engaged, and focused. I see students in the hall talking to each other, laughing, and getting to class on time. It's a total transformation in every aspect of the school, and we absolutely will lead to better grades and stronger doves. The difference and importance cannot be overstated. Another teacher stated, without phones to distract, more of my students are engaged in tackling new problems and taking risk on things that they might not have already known. Students are making more connections to prior knowledge when they are more fully engaged. Another person wrote, I've noticed that students are more likely to engage in verbal discussions and even physical activities without the distraction of their phones. They are not overstimulated and more likely to be open to different types of learning activities. So I have a lot more I could share with you all, and I can share that with you in an email to see what the benefits are like being in a school environment where cell phones are no longer a distraction. We're seeing students engage with each other in classroom discussions, having debates. One of the teachers said that in the year prior, our hallways would look like a zombie land because students will be walking in the halls, not engaging with each other, looking down at their phones, and now you're actually seeing students engaging with staff as well as their classmates. Something else that I noted too with this school year, there's been more communication with families. So if families typically, when they needed to reach out, they would reach out to their particular child, and then the child would then get in contact with a staff member here in the school building. But since students do not have their cell phones on them, families now have to call the school or have to send emails to teachers, and that allows for us to have a better engagement and connections with the surrounding community, which is a beautiful thing because I didn't expect that to happen. So that's a unique thing. As far as emergency cases, students are allowed to go down to the main office to unlock their Yonder pouch to call home. Or they can email, since all of our students have devices, they can email their children to get immediate reactions. But students who have special conditions, IEPs or 504s, they're allowed to hold on to their cell phones, but they can't be visible. It can't be visible, but this has been revolutionary. We've noticed a significant difference with the relationships that we're having now with our young people, that they're having with each other, and then also the relationship that our school building is having with families and community members.
So thanks so much to Principal Horn and Principal Racketa for joining this. And just we really think as we go forward, and we're interested in the board members' perceptions and reactions in terms of next steps, we're really making sure with this pilot, with our work, that we are not only benchmarking nationally and throughout the state, and I won't stop here because we're running longer, but in our feedback as we work to solidify this, listening to school communities that have already experimented, who have taken the reins in the real crisis that we're in to try to address this. And you heard from two, but there are many more, and those will, if you go to the next slide, be really part of the engagement strategy in addition to everything else, really building on the lessons learned in our school communities already piloting, as well as listening to students, staff, parents, and other stakeholders. And then finally, just so you see the timeline of this, we'll come back on the next slide for proposed revisions in December, first reader in February, second reader in April, with the idea that we have a new policy or updated policy for next school year. And with that, turn it back over to Commissioner Sally and his colleagues for questions.
Thank you, Chief Simmons. I really appreciate it. Just before we dive into questions, to get into some of the framing that you lifted up, I just want to announce that Commissioner Haynes Messenger has joined us. I forgot that she's on this committee, so just to reflect the record, that makes 1, 2, 3, 4 present and 1 absent today. So welcome, Commissioner Haynes Messenger. My apologies. I'm glad you're here. Because we're running a little bit low on time, this is what I want to do is to allow 1 question from each commissioner, and things that we have additional we'll pass on to you, Chief Simmons and Mr. Moore. and Seema. And we'll go from there if that works for you, just because we've got a long agenda.
Also, just so you know, the next presentation is it's a regulation, it's pretty streamlined, so
All right.
won't be as long as this one.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So let me turn it over to my colleagues to get us started with questions. So anybody who's got anything they would like to share, I think this is a really timely conversation on policy.
I don't have any questions. I will say, like, I have seen this happening in 4 schools in the last week, and it's amazing. Like, parents are on board. They have a paid position at one of the schools I was, where they gift card students to have them help with like check in and check out, and it is amazing. So, well done. Good feedback.
Thank you, Commissioner Messenger.
I'll chime in with a comment as well. I have small questions about implementation, but those can be saved for a later date. I think my comment is that I couldn't be more pleased with the direction we're headed in. I think this is so needed, and I think every minute that we don't have a more restrictive policy in place is a minute that kids are losing out on precious academic and social time. So kudos to those principals who are piloting. I think my one consideration for this policy is I think we should try and craft a policy that is pretty stringent and gives cover to principals, so that if anyone has to be the bad guy, it should be the district. We should take the heat, the district, the board, and give cover to principals. And it shouldn't be too prescriptive, because I think the beauty in what the principals shared today is they each had a slightly different approach for how they did this. They understand the overall goal and what we're trying to do, but I think they had room in their pilots to be able to implement something that made sense for each of their schools. So stringent policy that is clear, and that gives some room for the principals to breathe, but also gives them a little bit of space to do something that makes sense, would be my 2 cents. But just generally appreciative of those folks doing the pilots. Thank you for your comments, and also of the direction.
And Commissioner Lallinger, just to pick up on that, I think one of the pieces, as we've considered which way to go, was really being able to do pilots and experimentation in schools, recognizing that there may be different, and that implementation really here is the hard part, right? There are a lot of districts that went very fast to bans and then are struggling with the implementation. We think it's critical here to get the implementation right, and that's why we're trying to learn from our school communities.
And let me build on this point that Commissioner Lallinger brought up. So one of the tensions I'm weighing in my mind is thinking about how to strike the balance between having a stringent policy and ensuring our policy is flexible enough to give the CEO as broad a discretion as possible to do what's right for their school communities. And so something I would encourage the team to think about in greater detail in terms of like how to really craft this in a way in which allows the CEO and other school principals that discretion and autonomy, but provides some safety and guardrails around some of the issues that you framed. I want to go to our student commissioner, because I think this is an important area that our young people are engaged in, like every single day of their lives. So Commissioner Brooks, do you have any thoughts or comments you want to share?
I'm gonna be honest, my thoughts, I don't know, because recently there has been a rise in school harm, such as school shootings, correct? So I heard for some schools that if we do go with this, that's the phones will be locked up in offices, like front office. So in case of an emergency, yes, teachers do have their phones, but when it comes to our children, they would want to contact their parents also, or have a faster contact with someone that can help. So I'm not against it. Trust me, I'm all for it. But I feel as though there should just be some type of leverage in the policy. And I think for some schools, there should be like a survey that mostly teachers and principals should fill out and see how they feel about their phone, the phone policy, and see if that's what they want. Because at the end of the day, we are trying to do this for our children, but also we want to make sure that we're doing it fairly.
Commissioner Rooks, I think that's a really important point about access and emergencies. And so one of the framing questions, and my colleagues can chime in too here, is making sure that whatever way we go with cell phones and restrictive policies, that we also have ways in which students can access their parents, parents can access their students. You heard Principal Riquetta talking about how they worked in a way that there could be, but also making sure that we also recognize that if it is a true emergency, that we follow best practices out there for emergency protocols. And sometimes, even though people want to reach out to the parent, it could be really threatening to the students and really exposing if people were calling during schools. So that's a balance. And it was one of the framing questions. We want to get this right. We want to learn. And I think 100%, Commissioner Rooks, and we welcome working with you to make sure we have the sentiment of students, the sentiment of staff, the sentiment of principals, and on all the really important and hard questions about this baked in as we move forward.
One of the things I think Chief Simmons, I think, is an opportunity to consider is partnering with the board around their community forums this year, because this is such a rich and in-depth conversation that those focus groups can lend to some really meaningful feedback and helping craft that policy. So it's something that I would encourage you guys to consider in terms of partnering with the board this year on that topic. Before I move forward, I know I see a hand from the public. We're gonna pause public comment for just a little bit, and we'll come back and we'll circle back after we get done with the rest of the policies this afternoon. And then also, Chief Sivens, the last thing before I let you go, and team, is to also, as you guys are shaping up the policy, bringing this back, both the policy and a future first reader, is thinking about how to frame this in terms of how does this support board goals, student achievement as a whole. So, great. Thank you, Mr. Moore, and thank you, Seema, for the presentation this afternoon. Appreciate it. All right, let's move forward to policy LCA RA, conducting research, survey, and data sharing. Chief Sivens, is this one yours again?
Actually, if it's okay, Commissioner Sally, I'd be happy to kick that one off. And then, right. Josh, if you'd like to add, feel free to do so, and then we can turn it over to Dr. Wan. So good afternoon, commissioners and members of the public. For this next update, this is related to policy LCA, which is the policy around conducting research and surveys and data sharing. We are proposing a revision to policy to be able to incorporate protections for employees when it relates to data sharing. So OAA, the Office of Achievement and Accountability, has worked closely with the Office of Human Capital to put forward this revision. And at this time, I will turn it over to Chief Sivan to see if there are any preliminary comments he would like to make. And then in turn, we'll turn it over to Chris Wan, who will walk us through the revisions.
Not at all. It's OAA's shop.
Thank you. So nice to be here today. My name is Chris Wan, and I'm the Director of Research for City Schools. So I work with Teresa in the Office of Achievement and Accountability. And one of our offices and team's job is to work on policy LCA, which is our policy on research, data sharing, and surveys in the district. So we have a brief report we've shared with you guys today. We are seeking to update one of our regulations for LCA around our data suppression rules. So what I want to do today is just really quick explain to you guys what are our data suppression rules, what does that mean, what do they do for us, and then why are we updating them and what update are we making. So as you know, student and staff privacy is taken very seriously in the school system. We have obligations under FERPA and other Maryland state laws and regulations to protect student records, as well as staff records, especially in the case of like evaluation and other sensitive data. So we implement that in different ways. So one thing is, if someone can't gain access to a student's records, such as their report card or transcript, unless they are that student or their parent or guardian or another school official that has a legitimate interest in that student. So someone can't just, walk in and say like, well, I'd like to see my next door neighbor's Algebra 1 grade they got 5 years ago. That's their business. That's their privacy. And we would deny that request unless they, had written permission. So that's one thing we do. The other thing we do is that it's not always that clear cut how somebody's privacy can potentially be violated and information can be shared without their consent. We have to balance our desire for privacy along with our desire for transparency. We are asked to report on many things that happen in the school system, things like student grades and test scores. And sometimes when we're reporting those things, there are certain situations that can arise in which we could accidentally disclose someone's identity and potentially their grades or other, sensitive student records or staff data about them. That is where our suppression rules come into play. They are a set of rules that help us manage how we release data publicly about our staff and our students in a way that preserves their privacy. And they really kind of fall into two big categories. We need to be careful when we are revealing information about a student or staff group that has a very high rate of achieving an outcome or a very low rate of achieving an outcome, such that 100% of a group might have passed the test, or on the flip side, maybe 0% of a group passed the test. That, while could be displayed in aggregate, like we could say a school had 100% proficiency rate, so it might be thought of as a school level data point. It actually reveals something about the students. If I know that a 0 or 100% of students at a school passed the test, well, that's just not really about the school anymore. I actually now understand that anyone who attended that school, either did or didn't pass the test. So we have to be very careful about those situations. One thing we do as part of our suppression rules is we don't report. When outcomes are 100 or 0%, we do something called top and bottom coding. So instead of writing 100%, we write greater than 95%, or on the bottom, less than 5%. And that helps just put some uncertainty in there that helps protect student privacy, but still gives folks in the public an idea of, yes, like a lot of students achieve this outcome, or maybe not too many. But we need to be careful about those 0s and 100s. So that's what some of our rules help us to do. The other thing we need to be careful of is that when we're making a big effort now to cut our data in lots of different ways. We don't just look at school results. We look at different student groups within a school, different grades within a school, different student groups within grades within a student group. That can really start to make some of those groups small. And we run into another risk of inadvertently sharing someone's personal data. For example, if we have a group that's only a size of 1, and you see the pass rate is 100% for that group or 0%, well, that one person either did or didn't pass a test. So an example of that might be like if we go and we post a file to our website on MCAP results, and we want to cut it lots of different ways, and we say, okay, at school number 123 in 3rd grade, we had one Asian student who took the test and they passed 100%. Well, we're not putting that person's name out on our data file. So on one hand, you say, well, I don't know who that is. But if you go to that school and there's one person who fits that description in 3rd grade, we basically would have told you how they performed on a test. So another cornerstone of our suppression rules, alongside the top and bottom coding, are also that we need to be very careful when we start displaying data publicly about very small group sizes. So our suppression rules help us with that situation. When we originally revised our LCA regulations back in 2021, we used our suppression rules to set a limit on the group size that we would be able to display publicly. And that limit was informed by what the federal government does, what MSDE does at the state level, and also other school districts in the state of Maryland. And we drew that line at 10 students. So if you have less than 10 students in a given group, We do not release that data publicly. We will often asterisk it out and say it had to be suppressed, due to protect student confidentiality. So we set that limit for both students and staff at 10 back in 2021 when we originally drafted the suppression rules as part of the regulations to LCA. Since then, we've been talking a lot to our partners in human capital, who let us know basically, well, there's a difference in teacher or staff data and student data. And the big one is we have a lot more students than we do teachers and staff in the district. We have 70, 80,000 students, and almost like a tenth of that in terms of staff. So what HC let us know is that when they went to, talk about certain outcomes for staff at a school, that 10 limit was becoming really tough to deal with because it was hiding a lot of what was going on in the data. Like there might not be 10 female math teachers at a given school. And if there's not, we can't show any result. It really started to inhibit our ability, to be transparent about what's going on in the school. So we met with our partners in HC, took another look at our suppression rules, and are kind of putting forward the update today to the rules, where we want to create some differentiation between that cutoff for our students and that cutoff for our staff. So what we would like to do is continue using our cutoff of 10 for students. That's in line with what MSDE does in the state of Maryland when they release student results. So we wanted to honor that, stay in alignment with them. But when it comes to staff data, we're going to reduce that cutoff, start showing a little more of our data. And the new cutoff we would be suggesting for staff data instead of student, we would use 5 instead of 10. So in the case you had 6 staff members, we would be able to show those outcomes or that data point we were interested in. And that's really coming from the place that, we do. These are challenging rules. There's lots of different data points we share, lots of different situations and context we share them in. And we just want to make sure we're finding the right balance of maintaining confidentiality and privacy of our staff and students, with also transparency and the ability to report publicly on what's going on in our school. So that's the gist of the revisions we're suggesting today, mainly to reduce that suppression threshold, that cutoff from 10 down to 5 for staff, but to keep our original 10 in for students. So that's what we have talked through in the report I have on my screen today, which we've submitted. It is an update to LCA, the regulations, LCA RA. That we would like to change some of our suppression rules to better find that balance between student privacy and transparency in terms of our staff data. So that is basically it. Hopefully that wasn't too technical. It's a technical subject a little bit, suppression rules, but they are very important because, student privacy can be taken, has to be taken really seriously, and we don't want to inadvertently report on things by our staff or students that they wouldn't want shared publicly. So that is basically it from me today. But I'd be happy to take any questions about the updates we're suggesting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wan. I appreciate it. It is really important in terms of upholding the integrity of privacy, and I'm glad to see straight line alignment between like federal policy, state policy, as well as the district coming up with very good suppression rule policy. May I turn over to any of my board colleagues who'd like to provide comment or questions? We're all good. Commissioner Rooks, do you have anything additional?
Nope. The policy sounds good to me.
All right. Thank you so much. The one question I'm going to leave you with, too, Mr. Wan, is to, I know we get a lot of inquiries from the press in terms of our student performance. And I know typically when we get the compliance report, I believe it comes to this committee once a year. It may be helpful to help us to understand where we see this kind of bumping in with the press in terms of like how often they're asking for things where, we're seeing non-alignment with our policy and our regulations. And so it's just something to think about as we look at the compliance report that will come later in the year.
Yeah, certainly. And that's an issue we encounter frequently in our MPIA team. We do get a lot of those requests, and very often they can really be getting into very high level of detail, which can make those counts very small. So that's actually, something when we run into, I'd say almost on a monthly basis on our MPIA team that handles those requests. So great point.
And as the district demographics continue to shift and change, it's something that we're going to have to be really mindful of, that I feel confident that you guys have, but it's just something for us to continue. Commissioner Ames Messenger?
I was just going to add two other categories. So press, I think also like other research organizations, and then like advocacy groups, and where those are lining up and where they're different.
Yeah. And generally when we work with partners, like through our IRB, our research process here in the district, we are, we review their papers, their publications, to make sure that these suppression rules are respected. So it's not just in our own work, our own board presentations and materials. We also have different ways as we review the work of our partners and vendors and things like that, that we're trying to make sure they're not also inadvertently disclosing some of these details. Because they, as you point out, they do a lot of data reporting, a lot of times in this, along funding and grant reporting and things like that. So yeah, it's something we have to be aware of as well.
All right, there's no further questions. We'll let you go. Thank you so much, Mr. Wan. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Chief Jones. I appreciate it very much. All right, we are going to move to compliance reports. So our very first one, we've got 4 of them this afternoon. So ACA. Policy on non-discrimination, sex-based discrimination, employees and third party. So now turn it over to my board colleagues if there are any questions on the contents or the data that's updated by the system. None? Hearing none? Policy EAB is the next one, disclosure on financial impropriety and improper conduct on whistleblower. Any questions on this particular compliance report? The question I had, it doesn't have to be answered today. One thing that is not as clear and apparent in here are the statistics around how often this is occurring, and but it may be for a future compliance report, Chief Seven, that may be helpful for the board to understand.
Yes, happy to follow up on that.
Okay. We'll move on to policy JJIC, the academic eligibility for interscholastic and intrascholastic athletes. Are there any questions on this particular compliance report? This is a compliance report, just by way of background, that we've talked about in prior years on the policy committee in terms of the trend data that we're seeing here. So it may be helpful just to understand like what the district is continuing to like learn as we're reporting on JJIC. Who, Chief Simmons, do you know who covers this particular area?
This is athletic eligibility, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is Tiffany Bird and Sonia Goodwin in the Holtness office and ultimately the school's office. So I was just looking to see if they were on, but I know that while we're making sure that they're coming on, this policy is up for review on the schedule this year. So this will be an opportunity for us to dive deeper into a lot of the work on this context in terms of your questions, Commissioner Sally.
Yeah, and so if that is on the review calendar this year, I think it's a good opportunity to integrate that within the confines of the presentation. So we don't have to dive into it today, but why don't we make sure
Tiffany is on if you wanna check in with Tiffany.
Yeah.
Yes, I am here, and it is listed for on the conclusion section. I believe that this policy is up for review. We did see our numbers for the first time go over 6,000 since our COVID times. So we definitely have noticed that, and we have provided the updates and working with OAA, this is the first time that we've actually tracked unduplicated numbers. And additionally, with the emphasis put on middle school sports for the first time, you will see that this report includes the middle school sports participation numbers for the 7 district coordinated sport activities. Is there one area that you would like us to look at specifically, or was it just a general question?
Just a general question. And I think just given, I think you bring up a good point in terms of the middle school participation rates and the emphasis that we're putting on the inclusion of middle school sports. I think as we look at the revision on this policy, it would just be helpful to know how much the policy really does serve like that particular group of children.
Thank you so much. I have that noted.
All right. Any further questions from my colleagues? All right. Policy LCA, conducting research, surveys, and data. We also have a compliance report on that. I didn't notice that. Any particular questions on this one? And this is a policy, I think, I'm sorry, this is a particular policy where we've had a lot of good interaction and understanding in terms of the types of requests that are coming. So I appreciate the work that's done to compile this and the information that's provided. If there are no further questions on compliance reports, we can move into public comment. I know there are, thank you, Chris, I appreciate it very much. I know there's a couple public comments out there. Dr. Judkins, are there any specific ones you want to touch base on first?
We did not have any come to the board office.
Okay. Do we have general public comment today, I believe, from the audience? Go ahead. And you,
okay,
just for the record, can you state your name?
Yes, I can. Shazar Deshil for record. I just had a couple of questions just based off of the policies that you went through. The first policy, when it related to the cell phone data, there was a couple of questions that I had. One was, I know that, you know, we're moving forward in building equity among schools and in communities. And so I'm just wondering what other team is actually being in place to teach students around just the replacement behavior or strategies as it relates to appropriate cell phone use. I know that you guys have already made a policy around like picking it up, but they have to know exactly what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. So I don't know what team is in charge of making sure that there is some strategies or replacement behavior strategies in place for that. And then my next question was what data shows the frequency of the suspensions versus the disruption of use during the school day. I noticed that you guys picked out a lot of elementary schools to participate in the pilot. And so how did you come up or derive those schools to come up with that information? Because I didn't see any data shared tonight.
Seabed, do you want to take that? Or Kelly?
So I think I can answer the first one, and then Seema and Chief Simmons, if you want to jump in on the second one. But on the first one, part of our framing questions, one of the things that we know that we're going to be looking at is working with our student wholeness team to identify members of that team that will also probably be supporting us, especially as we look at the curriculum on digital citizenship. And we're thinking that undoubtedly appropriate use will be embedded in that conversation, as well as what strategies we can use for supporting mental health and other social emotional connected needs at the school as it relates to cell phone use and this policy.
And just to chime in
And I
on
can
the,
chime.
oh, go ahead.
I was going to chime in for the second part, like how the schools were chosen for the pilot. Dr. Santelisa's actually posed to all principals that if they were interested, that they can join the pilot. So it was based off of the school administrators that were interested in joining the pilot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does that do both questions there that you had?
Yeah,
Chief
it
Sim-
answered both. Yeah, I think Mr. Sivian was going to say something, but I'm not sure if he still wants to speak.
Yeah, let me give Chief Simmons an opportunity.
Chief Place Jose said exactly what I was going to say, but so we are on the same wavelength.
Awesome. All right. And, you know, I think while we're on the subject, I think, you know, the other thing to kind of consider too is that there's AI implications, there's teaching implications, there's all kinds of things like within the confines of the policy that like we need to consider in terms of like the interaction in the environment, but also ensuring that we're not stifling teaching and learning as well. Thank you so much. Are there any additional public comments that we may have this afternoon? Hearing none, that takes us to the end of our agenda this afternoon. Let me see. So just make sure we don't cover every single thing that's on here. I'm gonna phone a friend. Dr. Jenkins, do you know what the next meeting date is coming up? Sometimes when I pitch hit, I do not have all the information. So
give me just a second.
It's-
Sorry, I have to
it's Oc-
scroll just a bit too. I have it at my fingertips.
October 15th, Commissioner Sally.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it. So October 15th, we'll be back again in the afternoon to go through a range of policies and compliance reports. We do encourage members of the public who'd like to provide public comment to this committee and do so by signing up by 9 a.m. The Thursday, between the Thursday before the meeting and 5 p.m. on the Monday before. You can also submit comment on anything you heard today or anything you've heard in the past via the board office. So our email address is provided on City Schools website or by contacting the board office by phone. We're happy to review those and have a member of our staff respond to you. In addition, we look forward to seeing you at our next public board meeting next Tuesday. And thank everybody for your participation. We thank City School staff for their very thoughtful presentations this afternoon, the public for their comments, as well as my fellow commissioners for joining this afternoon. We'll see y'all soon. Take care. We're officially adjourned.
Thank
Bye, guys.
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank
Thank you for your questions.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.